But first, WestJet has confirmed to CBC News that it plans to wind down the operations of Sunwing Airlines. The Calgary-based air carrier bought its low-cost competitor in May, and WestJet recently announced the closure of its own budget airline, Swoop. As Philip Lee-Shannock reports, the move may mean an increase in flight prices.
I'm actually very surprised.
Anita Abdullah is about to board a Sunwing flight in Montreal to Veradero, Cuba. She's a frequent flyer.
Every year we're flying with them, same destination. We're flying with the kids all the time there.
And she's worried about the cost of that annual trip.
Because their prices are quite competitive, so we kept on flying with them. Well, we'll see what's out there when the time comes. It's not going to stop us from traveling, that's for sure.
2 months after WestJet acquired Sunwing, a leaked memo outlined its plans to shut it down and fold it into its operations. The company recently announced the closure of its own low-cost carrier, Swoop, earlier this month.
WestJet is looking to consolidate, to reduce their costs.
John Gradick is a professor of aviation management at McGill University in Montreal. He says WestJet just concluded an expensive settlement with its pilots who got a 24% wage increase. Now it wants to gain efficiencies by folding 3 operations into 1. Gradick says there will be less choice for consumers.
We might be going down a slippery slope here of situations where carriers are consolidating, prices will go up.
Sunwing scammer!
The Sunwing brand took a hit over the winter holiday travel period when frustrated passengers took to social media to complain about being stranded by delayed or canceled flights. Leslie Cater is a Calgary-based travel agent. She says the larger carrier may be more reliable.
You're flying with a company where they have a large fleet, and if your flight goes mechanical at the last minute, they can just zip in another aircraft and rejuggle their schedules.
But she predicts prices, which are already high post-pandemic, will remain high with the end of Sunwing, although Air Transat and low-cost carriers Lynx and Flair will still be around.
WestJet and Air Canada are going to dominate.
But in a statement, WestJet says winding up Sunwing will take years and that integrating Swoop is its immediate priority. Philip Lee-Shannock, CBC News, Toronto.
More political fallout is expected this week in New Brunswick after a policy meant to protect LGBTQ students was changed. The Premier is on the defensive, facing criticism and a small caucus rebellion. But as Kate McKenna reports, he's holding firm.
That is the role that parents need to play a role. Those are very formative years.
Premier Blaine Higgs says he's not backing down, even in the face of mounting political pressure.
It's not about my personal views at all. It's about a role as a parent and a grandparent, and thinking about my grandchildren now that would be attending school, and the fact that her parents would not know what she was being taught.
Earlier this month, his government announced a plan to change inclusivity guidelines, known as Policy 713. Among the changes, students under 16 will need parental approval to change their name and pronouns at school. The move has been heavily criticized, both inside and outside of government. Students orchestrated walkouts.
There were, I know, tons of people who were emailing and calling, including myself, all of the MLAs in New Brunswick to try to say, please don't change our policy.
Grade 11 student Alex Harris says this change will make it harder for youth to come out.
I came out at school first just so, because I knew, because of that policy, I knew that it was a safe place to come out. And it actually made it easier for me to come out to my parents because I knew I had a safe space at school.
The province's child and youth advocate is calling for the decision to be reversed. And the Premier is also facing a mini revolt inside his own caucus. Last week, 6 PC MLAs voted with the opposition to pass a motion calling for more consultations, and Dorothy Shepherd resigned as Minister of Social Development.
I have certainly, voiced my concerns about some of our government's approaches to certain topics, and this policy 713 and the debate that ensued in the House really kind of was my last straw.
Higgs told CBC's chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton that he's planning on pushing ahead anyway.
Very, very troubled by this. I'm troubled by it because I don't like to have this division within our team, but I certainly believe that we can find a solution that works for everyone.
That solution could include going to the polls. Higgs hasn't ruled out calling an election on this subject. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Many residents of Dauphin, Manitoba are seeking comfort from their faith this Sunday. It's been 3 days since 15 people were killed in a crash on the Trans-Canada Highway. Another 10 people are still in hospital. The CBC's Aaron Collins reports.
As they do every Sunday morning, the bells are ringing out across Dauphin. But services across this small prairie city are different today, including the one here at this Ukrainian Catholic church.
Well, Father at the beginning said that this was going to be for the ones that had passed on and for the ones that are fighting for their lives.
Like many parishioners here, Betsy Herman was shaken by Thursday's deadly crash. Several of the people on the bus would have been at this church last Sunday.
We know a lot of the people that were on that bus, and why did it happen is just unbelievable.
The scale of this tragedy, inescapable. People here struggling to process so much loss at one time.
There's just no getting away from it.
Manuel Nakaneshny is a driver for the bus company involved in the crash. His friend and colleague is among the 10 people still clinging to life in hospital.
Just last week we took 2 buses to Clear Lake with 2 loads of seniors, and we had a great time, and all of a sudden this just comes out of nowhere. It's just unbelievable.
Lift up your hearts to the Lord.
Across town, inside St. Viator's Catholic Church, Father Michael No speaks about the tragedy that's gripped this community.
So we're praying for all the individuals involved in the accident, but for the whole community.
Faith and community essential to moving forward in uncertain times.
We don't know what's going to happen in the near future, but as it happens, we will deal with it as it happens.
For now, people here are in a holding pattern, waiting for word of their friends and family hurt in the collision. Back outside the Church of the Resurrection, Jessie Bresden is hoping her friend injured in the crash will pull through.
I've known her basically all my life. We got married basically the same year, and she's the godmother to my daughter.
For now, Bresden is doing the only thing she can think of for her friend. You're praying for her today, I thought.
Oh, absolutely, for all of them.
Officials say they hope to release the names of those killed in the crash later this week. Once that happens, people here will begin returning to these churches, this time to honor the lives that were lost. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Dauphin, Manitoba.
For Rodney Stafford, the decision to transfer convicted killer and rapist Paul Bernardo from a maximum to a medium security prison has opened old wounds. Nearly 5 years ago, the killers of Stafford's 9-year-old daughter Tori were also moved from maximum security. Rodney Stafford spoke to the CBC's Rosemary Barton this morning about why he thinks Bernardo's transfer is a, quote, slap in the face.
This is something we fought for 4.5 years ago, and it just sucks to see a couple more high-profile cases having to go fight for their rights. The families and the victims should be receiving all the information, and the perpetrator shouldn't be entitled to anything. Like everything's backwards.
If you have questions about how and why Paul Bernardo qualified for a prison transfer, CBC News has written more about it online. You can find it at CBCNews.ca. In the U.S., Donald Trump's legal troubles are upending the Republican presidential race. More candidates are getting louder in their criticism of the frontrunner, while supporters of the former president are demanding loyalty. As Katie Simpson reports, it's getting messy on the campaign trail.
Loser, loser, loser.
The personal attacks on Donald Trump are intensifying as his political challengers desperately try to slow his momentum. Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor, who at this point is a long-shot candidate to win the Republican presidential nomination, argues the former president's most recent arrest should be disqualifying.
That's not the conduct that we should have from someone who wants to be president of the United States again.
Christie's pleas do not appear to be breaking through.
We lost
Trump remains the frontrunner, drawing thousands of supporters to his arraignment in Miami, where he was charged with 37 federal crimes over his handling of classified documents after leaving office. It's prompting some Republicans and former allies, including Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr, to question Trump's fitness for office.
He is a consummate narcissist, and he constantly engages in reckless conduct that puts his political followers at risk and the conservative and Republican agenda at risk.
Barr has described the indictment as very damning and dismissed Trump's claims of the case being politically motivated. But he does share one of Trump's concerns.
I don't like the idea of a former president serving time in prison.
Trump is demanding fellow presidential challengers pledge to grant him a pardon should they win the 2024 election. It's put candidates in an awkward position of trying to take on their opponent while also not upsetting his large base of voter support.
I think we need to let the courts do their job.
Former Vice President Mike Pence says he is not ruling it out.
We would evaluate any request for pardon for any American.
Trump's closest challenger, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, previously gave a similar answer, as did former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, while Senator Tim Scott dodged the question.
I'm not going to deal with the hypotheticals, but I will say that every American is innocent until proven guilty.
All of this goes to show that Trump is the focal point or the star of this race. It's his words and his actions that take up all of the oxygen in the campaign. None of his competitors have found a way yet to break through. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
There's been more evidence of rule-breaking parties at the height of the COVID lockdown by Britain's governing Conservative Party. Video published by the Daily Mirror tabloid shows revelers at the Conservative Party's headquarters in December 2020. People can be seen dancing and drinking. No one is socially distanced. And it happened during the time that the Boris Johnson-led government banned the British public from socializing indoors. On a Sunday political show, senior Conservative Minister Michael Gove condemned the behavior.
It's terrible. I just want to apologise to everyone, really, who, looking at that image, will think, well, these are people who are flouting the rules that were put in place to protect us all.
The video's publication comes just days after a parliamentary committee ruled that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had deliberately misled lawmakers about lockdown parties at his office. The United Nations says Russia is refusing to allow help into the flooded areas affected by a burst dam. The UN is urging Russia to act in accordance with its obligations under international humanitarian law. Meanwhile, flooding caused by the dam's destruction continues to devastate towns in southern Ukraine. Thousands have been displaced, and now other long-term consequences are starting to be felt. Our correspondent Margaret Evans is in the region and has this report.
A harried-looking young woman stands in a crowd of people pressing towards the door of a municipal building in a town called Novovorontsovka. On the other side of the door, a wall of plastic water bottles is being whittled away, people handing in ration cards in exchange for 2 bottles. Our water supply is now non-existent, says Natalia Zizenko. Even for basic needs, we don't have enough. Novovorontsovka sits on the edge of the Kakhovka Reservoir that until recently provided water for some 700,000 people. That changed when the hydroelectric dam of the same name was destroyed about 100 kilometers downstream on June 6th. The water level has since dropped by 70%, according to officials. It's a calamity Ukraine may have to cope with for many years to come, warn experts, with the potential to turn fertile land into desert. Denis Mironenko crouches down to pull out a few weeds as he walks the rows of one of his strawberry fields outside of town. He also grows grapes, both crops reliant on water pumped from the reservoir. If we irrigate with only what nature gives us, it will not grow, he says. In the summer, the climate is very dry and very hot, and so the harvest won't be here at all.
What's going to be the long-term consequences is still to be seen.
Saviano Abreu is with the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, speaking to us in Mykolaiv, about an hour's drive from Kherson, a city most immediately affected by flooding when the dam was breached. He says that breach brings with it other complications.
Mines is another huge issue here. This area is heavily mined.
Here, minesweepers are at work in an area east of Mykolaiv, territory occupied by the Russians until Ukrainian troops pushed them out last year. A team of 6 are covering a stretch of land with long metal detectors, their movements in sync like a slow and painstaking water ballet. The Halo Trust, a demining charity, was already at work here before the floodwaters arrived.
So the marks that you can see here on the sticks is the area that we had remaining. This whole area now has been underwater and will need to be rechecked.
Jasmine Dan, a Canadian, is Halo's regional operations manager.
We were almost done this minefield. It's an OZM minefield, which has explosives that are on tripwire that will essentially leap into the air and then explode. We found 2 of them here so far.
The worry is that Russian-laid mines, especially lighter anti-personnel or butterfly mines, will have shifted with the force of the flood. It is a huge setback. Even before the dam was destroyed, it was going to take decades to clear Ukraine of mines. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Southern Ukraine.
In parts of Canada, there are people campaigning to make public and school libraries remove books. They've claimed libraries are making sexually explicit material available to minors. The books in question are often ones that have content related to sexual education or LGBTQ and gender identity topics. The CBC's Nick Logan spoke with librarians and brings us this report.
A truly great library has something in it to offend everyone.
Wendy Wright says you should be able to find at least one book you don't like at your local library. Wright is the chair of the Intellectual Freedom Committee at the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. She's also the director of the Public Library in Smithers, BC. She has been paying close attention to attempts to ban or censor library books, which is happening across North America.
There are organized groups targeting libraries, and they are petitioning to defund libraries.
That's exactly what happened in southern Manitoba this spring, where people appeared before local councils claiming libraries were stocking sexually explicit books, which they describe as child pornography.
Why does Council continue to fund the South Central Regional Library, which continues to purchase and distribute materials that contain child pornography?
A similar issue came up at a school board meeting in Ontario's Durham region, where things got heated.
We're going to call a recess at this point.
And in Chilliwack, BC, someone went so far as to call the RCMP to accuse school libraries of putting child pornography on the shelves. Mounties said they found nothing of the sort. The books in question include illustrated sexual education books. Other books being targeted are aimed at teaching young people about sexuality and gender identity.
They're very popular and I think very well read. So they're not something I'm concerned about.
Ines Campbell manages a team that maintains a collection of more than 1.8 million books at Vancouver Public Library's Central Branch. And that's not including all the titles found at 20 other branches around the city.
And when we look at material for children or teens of different ages, we're really looking at that as part of the overall development. So the focus is not on a particular topic, but on is this described and talked about appropriately for that age.
Campbell said the collections team can't read every single book they consider purchasing from cover to cover, so they rely on summaries and information from publishers.
I think it's safe to assume if it's in a library, it's likely been vetted by lawyers, and it likely doesn't meet the definition of child pornography.
Jordan Donich is a criminal lawyer in Toronto who has worked on child pornography cases. He says publishers aren't going to risk liability by producing or selling anything that could be illegal.
If parents don't like sex ed, that's fine. They're allowed to have that opinion, but it doesn't mean you can use a child pornography backdoor to get rid of it.
Campbell says anyone can question why a book is in the library, even file a challenge to have it removed, but it's rare for a book to be pulled from the shelves. But she encourages parents to play an active role in their child's library experience.
We don't honestly know what's appropriate for that child in that patron's eyes, but parents, absolutely, we want involved with their children's reading.
Wendy Wright agrees it's up to each family to decide what they find appropriate, but it's not fair to make that choice for anyone else.
Even though we have books that offend these people who are petitioning, we will defend the books that those people approve of.
She says librarians want to make libraries a place for everyone, and they will stand up for having a diverse collection. Nick Logan, CBC News, Vancouver.
You're about to hear some of a very intimate concert played by bright classical musicians for people who have gone through dark times. And it was those same people who helped inspire the piece itself. Anand Ram has the story.
What you're hearing is hope. It's also despair, it's love, it's laughter. And to its audience on a rainy evening in downtown Toronto, it's more.
I felt like a new beginning.
Very romantic, very colorful, very vivacious.
They're patients, current clients of CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And they inspired this music by meeting week after week with Métis composer Ian Cuson.
They really shared all of themselves, and I wanted to return something that would sum up our time together, sum up our conversations, and honor the joy of that group.
The pilot program between CAMH and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra was about using the power of music combined with Indigenous healing practices.
We invited our patients to be able to come and kind of take a bit of a leap of faith.
Rennie Linkletter is from Rainy River First Nations and the Senior Director of Shikabe Makwa, the Center's Indigenous-focused mental health program.
And I know that many of us have had a lot of kind of traditional, mainstream, help in terms of accessing the service system. But here's an example of a program within the service system that helps us access different parts of ourselves through different ways.
And while the sessions were only about sharing music, people opened up.
There were certain things where I was struggling with.
When Bruce King, who's non-status Indigenous, took part, finding his sound took some searching.
They were telling me, okay, next week you're going to be bringing in your music. So then I was listening to Pavarotti. I was listening to Bach. I was trying to find this piece that was so moving to me but I couldn't find it.
He ended up finding a classical vibe in the conscious rap of KRS-One.
And it just spoke to me. The song was Remind, which was about talking about the fact that we can create anything that we want. It's all in our mind.
His reminder from this experience, what to hold on to.
I just need to keep music and seeing music as a tool to being able to keep me positive.
Music, not that it never wasn't, but now it has definitely become a non-negotiable value in my life.
Alex Abramenko was in the group too. He's open about his challenges with depression, anxiety, and borderline personality disorder. Coming together every week helped.
That's a big part of the experience, is actually being part of a positive relationship and having one modeled for you and participating in one.
It's really non-invasive,
Sarah Bell wasn't involved in this pilot program, but as a music therapist and counselor in Nova Scotia's Annapolis Valley, she knows music's indirect ability to translate.
Someone who's, let's say, struggling with a certain emotion or something, they might be able to say, yeah, this song is how I feel, versus having the words to be able to say that.
For Linkletter and others, success isn't just this near 10-minute composition. It's also how the program kept people coming back.
We were able to have 10 people begin the group. It is miraculous that on week 8, that 8 of those people were still part of the group.
And more audiences will get to hear this piece next year as it takes on new life with an even bigger orchestra. Anand Ram, CBC News, Toronto.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. The final round of the U.S. Open golf tournament is taking place at the Los Angeles Country Club. Right now, Rory McIlroy and Wyndham Clark are tied for the top spot on the leaderboard, with Ricky Fowler just one stroke behind. This week, the players have been dealing with more than just a tough course. They also have to put up with a bit of monkey business. Steve Futterman explains.
Normally during a golf tournament, this is a common sound. Virtual silence. Golfers do not like noise during their backswing. This is an angry Tiger Woods a few years ago asking a spectator who yells, "What are you doing?"
What are you doing?
Now there are ways to tell spectators to be silent. It's a much different thing to tell a bunch of monkeys to keep quiet. This is what some of the best golfers in the world this week have faced here in Los Angeles at the U.S. Open.
You can hear the monkeys almost every time you go back there.
You can blame it all on the late Hugh Hefner. Yes, the man who created Playboy created this minor complication.
So Hugh Hefner lived in that mansion for over 40 years and collected all sorts of animals. He exhibited them with a permit from the State Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Chris Nichols is the resident historian for Los Angeles Magazine. The former Playboy mansion is right next to the LA Country Club course.
His menagerie had at least 49 squirrel monkeys at one point, a marmoset, kinkajou, peacocks, all sorts of exotic creatures.
Hefner died in 2017, but the zoo remains, and the cages holding the squirrel monkeys are just a stone's throw away from the 14th tee. The players have noticed. Canada's Mackenzie Hughes. Have you heard the monkeys?
Yeah, I've heard the monkeys. I'm not sure if those are Hef's monkeys or not, but yeah, I've heard the monkeys. They're quite loud.
Sometimes, of course, the story can get a bit exaggerated. A few golfers were confused this week about what animals were actually there, like Michael Thorne Bjornsson.
I thought there was like an elephant or something over there.
No, there is definitely not an elephant there.
I've heard a lot of screeches and stuff like that.
There have been suggestions for years that Hefner actually placed his zoo as close as he could to the golf course as revenge for the LA Country Club rejecting his membership application. No one has ever confirmed that. Steve Futterman for CBC News at the U.S. Open in Los Angeles.
I wasn't much more than a baby. I thought he was a bear. The way my daddy carried me around.
It's the third Sunday in June, which means it's the day fathers and father figures are celebrated all across this country. While many people may be honoring their dad, just like Loretta Lynn,
They don't make men like my daddy anymore.
or Luther Vandross,
How I'd love, love, love to dance with my father again.
some may forget about it entirely because Father's Day isn't always the most remembered holiday. As The Guardian writer Tim Lewis put it, Father's Day now mainly seems to be an opportunity for internet businesses to flog the three commodities every father needs in his life: beer, coffee subscriptions, and hot sauce. In fact, some new data from the National Retail Federation in the U.S. did find consumers are expected to spend nearly 36%, or $12.8 billion less on dads than they did on moms last month. Well, maybe their dads are as hard to shop for as mine. Anyway, that doesn't mean people aren't finding ways to honor fathers. In Vancouver, a glorious new tradition has emerged, with the Vancouver Aboriginal Health Society hosting its first annual Father's Day powwow. Executive Director Rosemary Stager-Wallace explains what makes it so special.
We want to honor our fathers, grandfathers, our sons, and just really honor our protectors and providers. That's traditionally what they've always been for us. And by having these events, it just makes our future generations that much more stronger and healthier.
Elder Eugene Henry says it's only going to grow.
This powwow is a good size right now, but next year it's going to be twice the size, and the year after it's going to be 3 times the size. And we're going to be in a larger area too, because we'll need it.
So there is some inspiration and some hope to make the most of Father's Day. We'll leave you with some Mike and the Mechanics on the world this weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Good night.
As well as you